first of all, let's understand, I understand you don't intentionally make mistakes, but you need a little bit of education if you're going to be an investor.
Well, welcome to Tax Lien Certificate Investing, What They Aren't Telling You. Now, look, like any investment, there can be downsides or risks to things, but here's the good news. We have Ted Thomas here. Ted Thomas has over 30 years experience in real estate and, lien certificate investing. And by the end of this video, you're going to come away with a much better idea of how to do this right and not do it wrong. So, Ted, thanks so much for joining us. And first question for any of the listeners out there who aren't familiar, could you just briefly explain what is a tax lien certificate?
Okay, actually, it's just a piece of paper. That's all it is. It's a piece of paper that a local government, like a county or a municipality, would issue when someone doesn't pay their tax. So let me kind of review that. So all properties in the United States, they must pay property tax. So it doesn't matter whether it's a small farm, whether it's apartment property or a home. Everybody has to pay property tax. And if someone doesn't pay their property tax, then the local county will issue a notice of default. And there might be numerous of those because it requires, it's called a due process of law. They send a notice and say, look, you have to pay your tax. Then if you don't pay your tax, in about half of the states, they issue a piece of paper. It's just a simple piece of paper like I'm holding in my hand. And that piece of paper represents a tax certificate. So they sell those certificates to the public. Now, why would they sell them to the public? Well, the person that owned the property didn't pay. They did not pay the tax, and the local government needs money. So anybody that wants to pay the tax for someone else could do that. And you do that by paying a tax lien certificate, and they auction those up. I know that was a long answer, but that's what it is.
Well, that's interesting. So it sounds like a neat opportunity. So how do you find these auctions? I mean, how do you find a tax lien sale?
Well, the counties that sell those, about 1,500 counties sell tax lien certificates, and they'll advertise them on their website. They'll put them in the newspaper, that they'll have an auction, and they're going to sell those certificates.
Now, is this in every county across the United States?
No, it's only about half of the counties. There's 3,000 plus counties in the United States, but only half of them sell tax lien certificates. In other words, every county is allowed to collect taxes, but half of them are very benevolent. Now, that's my word, benevolent. They're very nice to people. They say, look, you're not going to lose your property. No one's going to take it away, but we want someone to pay the tax. So they advertise on their website and they advertise in the newspaper and say, we have all these tax certificates to sell. And so there's literally thousands of these tax certificates. I mean, it wouldn't be unusual for a county to have 2,000 or 3,000. A place like Miami might have 60,000 tax lien certificates. I've seen in Cook County over 100,000 tax lien certificates in one county. They're people that didn't pay their tax.
Does it work the same in all the counties? I mean, is the process the same? And do you make the same amount of money for your investment?
The money's different, but the process is always the same. Now, different states do it a little bit differently in terms of how they would pay. For example, I'm here in Florida. Florida pays all the way up to 18% on a tax certificate. But other states are different than that, like Arizona over in the western part of the United States, they only pay up to 16%. Whereas in the middle, in Iowa, they pay 24%. Illinois, as a matter of fact, pays up to 36%. But you can choose whichever state you want to buy them, because you can buy them online or you can buy them by physically going there and buying them.
Well, Ted, let me ask you, if you mentioned like Illinois goes as high as 36%, it seems like I'd want to just go to Illinois, wouldn't I? Because it pays more, or it could pay more?
Well, yes, that would be the natural thing to think of. But nowadays you can do things online. So a lot of people don't want to go all the way to that place. So if Illinois is selling them online, you could do that online in Illinois. But I always tell people, why don't you just do it close by? Now, one of the things that you could, people make mistakes on these things. I mean, you don't want to just take out a list and start picking ones you're going to buy. You should figure out which one you're going to buy, and then you should do some research. I mean, is it a country club property? Is it an average neighborhood? Or is it in a bad area of town? So you really don't want to buy a tax lien certificate in a bad area of town, because they don't pay taxes 1, 2, or 3 years, then you're going to end up owning the property.
Well, okay, you hit on something good there. And again, this sounds like the whole tax lien sounds like a certificate lien sounds like a really great investment opportunity. But What are maybe one or two or maybe three of the mistakes that people tend to make and should make? And how do you avoid making them, Ted?
Okay, well, first of all, let's understand I understand you don't intentionally make mistakes, but you need a little bit of education if you're going to be an investor. Now, tax lien certificates are abundant. Now, by that I mean there's going to be a lot of them. So let me just pick one state. I'll use Florida for the example. In Florida, they'll have 1 million tax lien certificates available at least once a year. So there's going to be a lot of them. All right, now, what wouldn't you want to do? Well, you wouldn't want to just say, put your finger down on the list and just buy one. You would want to say, well, wait a minute, where am I buying it and why? Okay, the why is you want to make a high rate of return. All right, so tax certificates we just discussed have high rates of return. All right, now let's think about this for a second. All right, where is the tax lien certificate located? The biggest mistake everybody makes is they just buy it and then they pray that it's in a good area. Well, I'm going to tell you, prayer is not a very good business strategy. You want to know that the property was something that's viable. In other words, the property owner is going to come in and redeem it. In other words, buy the lien back from you so you get paid. The idea was you bought a certificate so you could earn a high interest. What if the people don't pay you? Well, then you're going to get the property. What if the property was in a bad area? Would you want to buy in a bad area? I don't think you'd want to know that. So some due diligence is required of the tax lien certificate holder. Now, I'm going to tell you, the majority of tax lien certificates, I've been around for decades doing this, a lot of people, they just pick them and hope it's going to work. They don't go look at it. I have a rule. I always look at, you wouldn't marry someone that you hadn't looked at. Same kind of thing. Tax lien certificate, you should know what you're buying. Now, once you're in your own community, you'll know, the northwest area of town is bread and butter area. The northeast maybe is country club, and down here is the industrial. You get the idea. So you'd want to know where you were buying. So I don't think I'd go too far away. I think I'd stay close to home.
Well, okay, and then that sounds like a good idea. Starting out, you want to see with your own eyeballs. But then if you keep doing this investing, Ted, obviously you mentioned you could do it in other states online. What if there's a good-looking property, I'm in Cleveland, you're in Florida, if I saw one in Florida, what should I do? How should I do due diligence if it's so far away and I'm interested in buying that property?
Okay, well, in the old days, 30 years ago when I started, what we had to do is we had to travel there, get the list, and once you had the list, then you would every property has a number, so you could look up the property number. It's one number in that state, and no one else can have it. You look up that number, and then you could go at the county. You could type that number in, and it would show you an outline of the property. Sometimes they had a picture of the property, and then if you wanted to, you get in your car, you could go drive by. Now we have a computer, of course, so that's a lot easier. So you go online to that same state, okay, and then go to that same county. All right, now that county, look up a tax lien that you want to buy, and then in the county records, they will show all the information about this. Now, we actually have an auction calendar that people can go to. That speeds the whole process up. But you can do all of this online in today's market.
Hey, I just want to remind all the folks watching, if you do have a question for Ted that doesn't come up here, leave it in the comment section, and he will answer it at another one of these videos that we do. Hey, Ted, I'm wondering, one other thing, though. So you go to a tax lien certificate auction. Are there any mistakes people make when they're actually at the auction? Because it can be pretty exciting there.
It's exciting in the sense that, let's use Arizona. In Arizona, the certificate pays all the way up to 16%. Okay, so the first bid is at 16%. That's the highest you could earn. But the next bid that comes in is going to be 15.5. Then the next one's 15, and it keeps going down. The lowest bidder wins the auction. The lowest bidder. Now, the reason that the county does that, but they reduce the interest that person's going to have to pay you. And so they made that to the advantage of the homeowner, not to the investor. So people bid down at tax lien certificate auctions, whereas at property auctions, they bid up. It's the opposite.
Can I ask, is there something people need to keep in mind between, and I'm assuming you could do a tax lien certificate just on land, or is it always on a property, a physical structure?
Well, every piece of property in the United States is taxable. So it could be a piece of land in a bad area. It could be a piece of land out in the middle of a field. Farmers have row crops that they have. Other agriculture would be like orchards. All those things. Everything is taxable except basically the churches and the schools. Everything else is taxable.
Is there any thing you have to think about in terms of if you're looking at a rural area versus a more, urban city? Are there any things to consider with those two scenarios?
Yeah, that's a good question. What you're looking for when you're buying a tax certificate is value. I mean, is there value there? For example, if you looked up on a big list of tax lien certificates, let's say there's one county and it had 30,000 certificates, and you knew they were all houses. All right, so you'd want to know the value of the house, because if you bought a certificate and you don't get paid, what's your recourse? You can't call the county. You're going to have to say to the county, I didn't get paid, and then you're going to have to do something about foreclosing on that property. So you'd want to have a decent property. So if you know it was a house, well, you could easily check the value of a house. You could do that by checking the neighborhood for comparables. You could call the multiple listing service. You could use Zillow. You could use Trulia. You're getting the idea. You could check for comparables. Now, you could also do that sitting at your computer, because when you typed in that county, you could also go to the tax assessor site and see what the tax assessor value. In other words, if you're buying a tax certificate, you want to make sure there's value. All right. So there's certainly value in land. Now, lots of different kind of land. Okay. So if it's grazing land, that's going to have one value. If it was row crops, meaning, cabbage or strawberries, that's going to have a real high value because it produces a lot of money, so that's going to have an ROI. So that would really be, very valuable property. Whereas something that was just a little plot next to the road that was just not used, well, what are you going to use it for? You can't build a house right next to the road. It's not going to have very much value. So you don't want to buy that. A lot of times, homeowners associations, they will have all kinds of common areas. In other words, a swimming pool and a clubhouse and all that. That's all common area. All right. Sometimes the homeowners don't pay the tax. Well, if you buy the tax certificate, you're paying the tax. If they didn't pay, what are you going to do with all that common area in the swimming pool? Are you going to go live there? Well, if you don't get it. So if someone doesn't pay their certificate, you're going to get the property. So this is not without recourse. I mean, some people say, oh, no worries. I tell people tax certificates, in my mind, are the safest investment in America today. Why are they safe? Because I go check and see what I'm buying.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like that's really key to doing this right. See what you're buying and know what you're going to do with it, if you end up with it. Hey, quick follow-up question. That if the homeowner does not pay the tax and the property comes to me, what if I just don't want the property? Do I have to take it?
No, you could just let it go to stay in default, and then the county will actually take the property, and then they'll resell it at an auction, which will be called a tax defaulted auction, not a tax lien auction. They'll sell it at a tax defaulted auction. The county will constantly try to any property with any value. The county will try to sell that, because you see they're going to try to sell it for any value. Because if it's on a default list, nobody is generating tax. The county is in place for one reason only, and that's to provide service. In other words, the roads, the schools, the fire department, police department, all those are services. Well, how are you going to pay the police, the fire department, school teachers? You have to have revenue. The revenue comes from taxes on houses or on property, period, on all kinds of property. So if the property's in default, the county doesn't want any defaulted property. They'll do whatever they can to sell it, including starting the bids at 5 and 10 cents on the dollar for that property.
So, Ted, if there's somebody's watching and if they're thinking about tax lien certificate as an investment, and they think it could be a neat strategy, but they want to do it right, what do you advise? What should the next steps be for that person?
Well, of course, I'm partial because I'm teaching people all the time. But my first thing to tell people is that we teach classes that last all day. So we have virtual workshops, and people can attend a workshop. Now, it's not free. It's $47. So if you haven't got the $47, don't bother going to that site. But you want to go there and you could learn, but it's an all-day class. It starts at 11 o'clock in the morning and it goes all the way to 5 in the afternoon. And there's various speakers in there talking about tax liens, tax deeds, showing examples or whatever. It's a very intense class for some 6 hours. And during the class, you can actually type in questions and there's people to answer them and so on. So they're all professionals teaching how you could make money. So that would be what I do, number one. But if you're going to be a person that doesn't want to get education, you want to go do it, then the first caution you want to have is you don't want to buy something you haven't seen. Second thing you don't want to do is you don't want to buy a tax lien unless you know what you're going to do with it. For example, if you don't get paid, what are you going to do with it? So that's an exit strategy. You're either going to resell it, you're going to trade it, you're going to do something with it so that you can make money. There's no sense in just putting money in and not knowing what you're going to do long term.
So, Ted, with so many, potential auctions out, happening throughout the United States, how does somebody find out where they are and when they're happening?
Well, in the past, that was a big, complicated process, trying to find out where all the auctions are. There's over 3,000 counties in the United States, and that means there's going to be a lot of auctions. So while I'm talking, they're just going to put up an auction map picture here. So while I talk, you can see white circles on this map. Well, those white circles, actually, you could go electronically to any one of those, and you could then learn how many properties are going to be auctioned, when they're going to be auctioned. And for people that want that, they can just go below me, and it's a gift, and they can download that. But let me just tell you what's going on. In a small population county, there's going to be a few, meaning dozens or hundreds of tax lien certificates or even tax deeds. However, in a large population county, it's going to be hundreds, even thousands. So this is a business of abundance. Just go below me and you can learn a lot where they are and how many.
Well, if you've been watching this, you've been interested in tax lien certificate investing, now you have a little better idea of how to do it right. You heard some of the things that maybe some of the other folks aren't telling you. And if you'd like to hear more, definitely you should take Ted up on the offer of the introductory class. Give you a great sense of whether or not you want to do this. You can click right below and join the class and find out if this is for you. Ted, thank you so much for sharing with us.
You're welcome. Don't forget, request your free auction list right below me.